Hello again, everybody. We are talking today about the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement renewal preparation, the T-18 plan. Daryl Orman joined me today again because our live partnership has proven to be very successful. I think it's very entertaining to when we two both talk, but then it's our opinion. What's yours? Let us know. We have various guests. We have people from Ireland. We have hello Sylvia from Poland, and Helmut. Nice to see you here again. We're expecting questions from you as usual because last time you made it really really interesting. So, hello everybody, and just a quick introduction. I'll probably start from Daryl actually because he's my guest today. So, Daryl, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Alex. A pleasure being here again. Hi, everybody. So we've got a great audience. India, Poland, Ireland, and some other countries that are not appearing. So please just share with us where you guys are from. So 30-second bio. I used to run. I was the CEO and founder of Emerset, one of the founding SAM organizations in the world, almost 17, 18 years ago. Since then, I've moved on. I'm doing other things, but I'm still very much embedded into Microsoft negotiations in general. That's my passion, and I've been in the high tech or tech industry for it's going on 25 years now. A lot of experience with large organizations and software contracts in general. So again, Alex, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Daryl. So quickly, just about myself. Well, I'm Alexander Golov. I started this channel last August, and we get into 1,000 subscribers. By the way, please subscribe, and if you like what we're talking about today, please hit the like button. It's one click, but then other people can discover it and learn from it as well. So thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. I just posted something that my birthday is 1st of July, which is in just a few weeks. So I'm really hoping to get to 1,000 subscribers by my Thursday. I know it's a bit selfish, but please do. Anyway, so I'm a founder of this channel, as I said, and I'm a CEO of a company called Itamin, and SAMexpert is now becoming the trade name for Itamin. So we're going to trade under this SAMexpert trademark. Just not stop confusing people with various company names. I used to have a company between 2003 and 2013, which was at some point it was a Microsoft partner. I learned the hard way not to be one. So right now I'm 100% independent. SAMexpert or Itamin is 100% independent consultancy because I just want to drive one agenda, which is customers' agenda. That's it. So. And together with Daryl, we joke that we have probably altogether almost 50 years of experience in the IT industry and the software asset management industry. So yeah, quite a long journey. Just a quick reminder, I think all of you have already subscribed for this training, but there's a free training we're going to run between August and November, and Daryl is going to be joining me on the majority of the sessions, especially when we talk about negotiations in relationship with Microsoft. Daryl has some Microsoft history before he became an independent consultant, so he knows a lot about how the things work on the other side, which is very beneficial for all the training attendees, because we're not doing a licensing training. It's going to be a license management training. So we're going to talk about how to manage licenses, not about how to, assign. We'll mention those, how to assign, various cores to various VMs. And if you ask questions during the training, we're going to be answering them because these are business sessions. The training will be a proper training session, not like just a 100% business oriented session. And for those of you who want to dive more in depth into technical aspects of Microsoft licensing, I have a show weekly, 6:30 a.m. London time, called Monday Morning Microsoft on this channel. So just subscribe to the channel. You'll get notified each time there's a live, and then you can watch them recorded. So if it's for any reason it's inconvenient for you to watch it so early, obviously people closer to the east can watch it live during the day. For Americans, it's you have to wake up, at midnight. So it's not very convenient. So that's where we are. That's what we're doing. And basically, let's get back to the topic of today's live, which is the T-ISA team plan preparation for a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement renewal or exit, by the way. And I'll pass the mic to Daryl.
Thank you, Alex. So I love starting off with a quote by Sun Tzu. So I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to read the book, The Art of War. If you haven't, I highly recommend getting a copy. It's a book on how to basically conduct a war or wars or battles that was written over 2,000 years ago by a scholar called Sun Tzu. And what I like about the book is that it has a lot of references that if you take them in the correct context, you can absolutely use them in today's business, in today's negotiation, without maybe the bloody part of conducting a war. And one of my favorite quotes is, let me just read it out so I don't, so I'm accurate, then I'll explain it. Now the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple, ere the battle is fought. The general who loses a battle makes but a few calculations beforehand. Thus do many calculations lead to victory and few calculations lead to defeat. The wisdom here that most people don't implement, even though it's obvious, it's logical. Prepare, and prepare a bit more. The less you prepare, the odds are the less success you're going to have. The outcome isn't going to be optimal. Today, we're going to talk about how you prepare and how long you need actually to prepare for a large enterprise agreement renewal. Or again, as I like pointing out, and I've pointed out in previous lives, this, if you conduct multiple agreements or you are responsible for multiple vendors, Oracle, SAP, IBM, any large vendor, these rules apply for all of them, with specific Microsoft anecdotes that we'll talk about. So let's see how you actually prepare for a Microsoft renewal. Please, Alex.
Yeah, so we start with how Microsoft actually prepare, because Microsoft is a sales organization. That's what they do. I mean, you may think about Microsoft as a technology leader. Yes, they are, but also the power of Microsoft's business, their success, lies in a very meticulous scientific process of selling, which starts from the very beginning of your enterprise agreement. Daryl?
So, yeah. So this is, I'm giving you what happens in the background, what happens within Microsoft. One of the key success factors preparing for any renewal, any negotiation, is understanding who you're dealing with. It's not only about understanding yourself, it's understanding how the other side is preparing for the same negotiation, but has a different agenda. And if we look at Microsoft actually, the day after they sign the agreement, or almost the day after the sign agreement, basically 6 months, 8 months later, their team is already working towards the next renewal. That's how Microsoft works. It's not something that each account manager decides on how are they going to work with a specific customer, what's going to be the protocol. This is a protocol. This is a set of rules, methodology, that the entire organization is aligned to work with. So you have to understand this, because if you understand how Microsoft works, it will help you prepare. So basically, the account team that's working with you or working with an organization around, I would say, 30 months prior to the, 6 months after the actual renewal, everybody starts to get organized. Your account team starts to work. There are business priorities and business plans that are put into place. There's a discussion that starts to happen very quickly. 6 months have gone by. A discussion starts to happen around true-ups. As Alex pointed out, Microsoft is a technology company, of course, but I'm not even sure if to say maybe they are a sales organization. They are a very, very aggressive sales organization, for the reason being that everybody from your tech account manager to your director that's responsible overall for your region, everybody's compensated on meeting a quota. And ultimately that goes up and up and up and up all the way to shareholders. So they are a sales organization. And immediately after they've signed that agreement, they're already starting to think about the next true up and how much additional revenue, because that's the baseline now. The baseline now is the current revenue from your signed agreement. And every year they have to increase that by 8, 10, 12, 15%. Thus, they're already talking to you 6 months later, they're thinking about the true up. And that's already part of the process of engaging and getting to know you, having a foothold in your organization. And what we see, if you can move forward, Alex, is that they actually, at a certain point, they actually start to understand your organization maybe even better than you do, because they've got a foothold in various aspects of the business. They understand the deployment, and they're starting to push additional products, and they want you to start in moving to the next version or upgrading or deploying this security product. It's all about them pushing the value, the so-called value of what you're already paying for. Now, it's not only for you to get value, to realize the value, it's for them to make sure that you are engaged, that you are embedding what you've purchased. And once you've already embedded what you've purchased, the stickiness keeps on growing and growing and growing from a sales perspective. Nothing wrong with that. But that's the whole thought process. And you have to be attained, and you need to understand that. So you can start preparing, because around that 18 months where Microsoft's already doing that value briefing, explaining to everybody, the executives, everybody in the organization, what's going on, you need to understand that Microsoft's already thinking at that point about the renewal that's coming in 18 months. And that's not a long time away.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think there are these 2 points, 24 months prior and 18 months prior. They're pretty important, because obviously what they're trying to get from you 24 months prior to before the renewal, and we're talking about here about the 3-year EA. There may be different lengths. I think you need to control the flow of information that goes to Microsoft. Obviously, they'll be there. They'll be very friendly. And then again, I'm not blaming them, as Daryl just said as well, for trying to sell. It's what they do. It's their business. I mean, when we talk to our customers, we also try to sell, understand what their pains are. They make propositions, throw in ideas. And that's what Microsoft are going to be doing. If you want to control the flow of information to Microsoft, if you want to be a bit on the cautious side, make sure you control all the touch points of these, or when these things happen. You make sure we're going to talk about it, but make sure your C-level people are briefed, and make sure that when you talk about technical details, do not disclose too much. Disclose just enough. Don't give away ideas yet. Then we have the true up,
and then the cycle. It's already a cycle. It's a well-oiled machine. You're already coming to your second true up. The second true up is really substantial, because that's going to be the basis, the new baseline for your renewal agreement. So they'll start pushing for information, for data, as Alex said, really engaged with your team, and they are in the game to get a good understanding of what's deployed, how it's deployed, and where it's deployed. A renewal presentation usually takes place 12 months prior, either directly by Microsoft, or Microsoft engages with one of their partners. It could be the reseller, It could be one of the cloud partners and so on and so on. But that's the idea, is that they're starting to really talk about the next technology. Time goes by very quickly. New technologies start rolling out all the time. Maybe technologies that have been out but you haven't engaged with. So they've done a gap analysis. They know where you are. They know where they want to take you. And now the discussion starts on really engaging and selling. And usually it goes up to the executive level, the business level. Many times it's easier to sell to the business than to the IT professionals or to procurement or to asset management, because it's easier to influence a business decision maker than somebody that, no offense meant if there's any business decision makers here, but business decision makers are driven only by value, and that's good. But on the other hand, there are other considerations that sometimes they're not aware of, and Microsoft's very clever, very smart to play that gap between business value and what's actually delivered, how it's delivered, and at what cost.
Yes, let me move on a bit. So here we have this true up engagement.
Yeah, that's the true up engagement, and basically negotiations have already started at least 12 months before. Even if you're not aware of it, negotiations have actually started by Microsoft. So let's see if we go to the side of the customer now and see how this correlates and what you need to do in order to match that plan. And that's part of your responsibility, not only from a financial perspective, because the outcome always has a financial number, but it's how you manage the relationship. How you manage the relationship once internally within your organization. So if you're managing the Microsoft ticket, you're actually managing the full relationship with everybody in the organization. And you need to be perceived as the leader, not as a follower. And I think that's a big differentiation of how you might see your position. And those of you that take a leadership position, and you might not be a decision maker, you might or you might not, but if you're not a decision maker, you can still be a leader. You can still be that person that is delivering the value of the Microsoft contract. And it starts, the real value starts, well, you could start where Microsoft starts, and that's where I would recommend, but let's be realistic. You've got other priorities. The organization has other priorities. Everybody's busy. But you need to start at least, at minimum, to my opinion, 18 months prior to the renewal to start looking at what's happening. You don't have to start negotiating. We're not there. But you need to start preparing and assessing. You might have lost a bit of control after you signed your agreement, 18 months, other priorities. But now it's time to start understanding what's going on. And this is taking a leadership role. And we'll talk more about preparing, assessing, and optimizing. I'll let Alex talk about that as we move forward. But that's really a lot of technical stuff, a lot of asset management, optimization, and I would also say getting to know your organization. You might be new in your role. You might have moved. You might have transitioned from a different vendor into Microsoft, or you might have just lost touch because of priorities that have changed. So this is a really good opportunity to start assessing, start understanding who your organization, how your organization is structured, the decision makers, and start engaging with everybody. So 18 months prior, that's what I would say ideally is the time to start thinking, talking about the renewal.
Can I challenge you on the 18 months, please, Daryl? So as if I go back to the previous slide, but I probably won't. Can I? Yes, I can. Yeah. So Microsoft approaches you with a value briefing at the executive level around the same time. So wouldn't it actually make sense just to either ask Microsoft to delay the meeting, start preparing, and then delay the meeting, or start maybe preparations, just knowing that there's this value meeting, say a month before that meeting, so at least you have your executives briefed on the real value, on the internal perspective on what's going on?
So you're absolutely correct. If you are well attuned and connected to what's happening within your organization in the various sectors, so it could be the server side, the client side, could be the cloud, could be operations, various aspects, various connections back to Microsoft. If you are able to lead the conversation, or at least be part of those conversations when Microsoft starts to engage, that's of great value. It's also important to brief your team when Microsoft starts to engage with the decision makers. It's important for you to brief the team and say, this is fantastic. Microsoft wants to provide us with insight into the latest technology, into what's happening, into security, into what's going on with the cloud. But please just keep in mind, they are already in negotiation mode. So just watch out what information you start to share with Microsoft and what maybe we shouldn't share at this time. So again, Microsoft might be a key technology partner, but on the other hand, they are a vendor. They are in it for revenue, and you to make sure that you control that, because at the end of the day, everybody's got a budget, and that budget has a cap to it. And if you
Yes.
don't meet that budget, we all know what happens. Doesn't matter how good the tech is. The budget is the number one priority.
But we'll get to that. So, and how we time the negotiation phase here is to align with the time that you are presented with the initial bill of material. So that's when negotiation starts. Not 3 months before, not 6 months before, a year before the actual renewal. And if you don't engage in the negotiation, I think you can just run yourself in the corner, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Negotiations, we'll talk about that. We've got a full session on negotiations, I think, in a couple of weeks, and we'll talk about it more in depth in a minute. But absolutely, negotiations actually start 12 months prior. You need to be prepared for that. You need to prepare your team. We'll talk about team, internal team, external team. You need to start working on your bill of materials. Very important. That means, and that takes a lot of time. We all know that takes a lot of time. That's a moving target. You need to have all the pieces in place, and you need to provide the bill of materials. You don't want to be in a position where Microsoft dictates what they think or what they believe is your requirements and your bill of materials and your needs. So bill of materials is also telling Microsoft, I'm in the driver's seat. This is my organization. I know what I need. So yeah, take this and let's discuss what I'm providing to you and not what you are providing to me, because that's how Microsoft likes to work. They like to be in the driver's seat. And then you have the business case that you need to prepare internally, finance, get everybody aligned, budgets, budget committees. That all takes time. Everything here you know, but many times we all forget how long each one of these stages takes. Even signing the contract with legal coming in. When do you bring in legal? Do you bring in legal at the last minute, or do you bring in legal 6 months or 12 months beforehand and start circulating the contracts? Very important, so you don't lose one, you don't lose the lead position in the negotiation. And many times, if you leave things to the end, as we all know, they'll be overlooked. There'll be priorities. Legal might take a second step in comparison to finance, the financial aspects. And you might need to trade off between legal and between financial concessions because you started too late on legal. So everything needs to be taken into consideration. This is not rocket science. This is just putting a nice project Gantt in place and putting the blocks and starting to work accordingly. So let's move forward. Let's start to talk about some details. We talked high level, macro. Let's talk about some details. Now, we've got T minus 18 and various months, but let's be realistic. We live in a realistic world. If you can start T minus 18, start T minus 18. At minimum, start T minus 12 or T minus 10 at minimum. Again, depending on the size of the organization, depending on the number of people involved. Do you have a SAM tool? Don't you have a SAM tool? A lot of variables that come into play. One of the first steps that you need to start working on is the team. Who's going to be on the negotiation team? You need legal and you need procurement. You need finance. You need IT, of course. You need business leaders and your executive team to be involved. Who's going to be negotiating? You need to be really, really clear about it, because if it's not clear who is the lead negotiator, Microsoft will automatically circumvent procurement or IT and go straight to the decision makers, because it's always easier, as I said, for Microsoft to engage with business. And the business is easier to work with. I'm being very delicate with my words, and to persuade to take certain packages without understanding what the long-term ramifications are, just because they are the greatest, best, and most shiny diamonds in the box at that time. And Microsoft is really good about that. So we've got the team stage. Let's move on. So again, this can start with T minus 18, and we can move on. So let's move on, Alex.
That's the next one. It's not their team. You need to know your.
Oh, sorry, their team. Sorry, you moved too quickly and I missed the move. So absolutely. So we talked about the internal team. Now let's talk about what's going on the other side with Microsoft. It's not only about knowing yourself. It's really, really important knowing yourself. It is just as important, or even more important, knowing the other side. Now, it's not only about knowing their names. Okay, I work with Michael, he's my account manager, and I work with Douglas, he's my TAM. It's not enough to know who your core team is within Microsoft. You need to understand who they report into. What district or region do they report into? If you're a very large enterprise, there's going to be an executive sponsor on Microsoft's behalf that's responsible for you. You have to know who that is, and you have to do a bit of digging to understand if that person, that executive sponsor, has a relationship, a contact point with somebody within your organization. Because otherwise, you're going to be circumvented during the negotiations. Things are going to take place behind your back, and you're not even going to know where that actually happened. So you need to map that out. You need to understand who they are, who reports into who has connections into your organization. And another thing I'm going to throw at you that most people don't think of, but it's also crucial, it's to do a personality analysis. So it's also about understanding the personality of the person that you're going to be working with. And there are various, we can talk about it. If you want to join me, I've got a free negotiation training coming up. You can have a look at on my LinkedIn page. And I talk about that as well. I talk about understanding the personality types, because each personality type has a different way of working, talking, negotiating, even emailing. And this is where you are taking control by understanding that person's personality. Is he a driver? Does he procrastinate? Is he aggressive? Or is she aggressive? What style of negotiation do they take? Very, very important. Then you can also brief your team about it. And there are a lot of tools that I talk about in my training that please join, and I'll share that with you as well. It's very relevant to Microsoft and to any other negotiation that you might be engaging with. Alex?
Yeah, I wanted just to add a couple of points here. So when you think about their team, why we highlighted the entire team here is Don't only think about the business people you talk to, account managers, executive sponsors. You also will have people, especially if you're a big organization, you will have people on the ground from technical teams. If you think that a technical consultant from Microsoft is not rewarded on sales, that's a wrong way of thinking. Everybody, even so-called TAMs, technical account managers, technical consultants, everybody is metered on their sales performance or influence. So they're there trying to see if there's an opportunity to upsell something, which is not necessarily like a sales exercise. But maybe they actually see that you need that tool. They think that you need it, and it's so brilliant. It's so awesome. It provides new functionality. You'll become more secure. You don't necessarily need it, but they think you need it, and they report into their bosses. They're forecasting the sales, so make sure that you control these touch points at every level. Every level. Don't forget about the tickets, because I've seen mistakes made like that when people at a higher level of negotiation knew everything about the customer had going on in their infrastructure, even what the customer didn't really want to disclose.
I want to add on to that, Alex. Another aspect of their team is the reseller. Is the Microsoft reseller. The Microsoft reseller is actually part of the Microsoft team. Let's not get confused about priorities. The Microsoft reseller has its first loyalty to Microsoft. I don't care what you say. It doesn't matter how close your relationship is. Ultimately, they are also a sales-driven organization. And you need to understand, sales-driven organizations have their first priorities with their biggest vendor, and their biggest vendor is Microsoft. So you need to keep out and understand their team is also your reseller that you're working with, and everything that you say will and must be passed on to Microsoft.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and appreciating that may have been a bit theoretical. So here we get into what you actually need to do. How
Yeah. So let's start on documents. What documents do you actually need? One of the things that usually happens in negotiations is that you lose your core documents. I've asked so many times for the original EA agreement or your unified support. We haven't spoken about unified support, what was known once as Premier. Alex, maybe we should have a live on that, because that's a whole subject, getting complex, getting really, really expensive, that unified support piece, and it actually works in very nicely into EA preparedness. So let's keep that in mind.
Can we ask our audience, please say in the chat if you'd like us to have a dedicated live on unified and Premier support. So please say that you're interested. That's it. Just interested.
So you start off with, first of all, collecting all those relevant documents, and then once you have all those relevant documents, it's time for you to start working. It's for you to put together, actually writing what you have today. It's getting your readiness and strategy documents ready. So one piece of it is actually defining really well what you have today, what you've purchased, what are your terms and conditions, because you're not going to start an agreement, a negotiation, without understanding what you've already accomplished. Because ultimately, you want to, first of all, exactly like Microsoft does, they start from the baseline of the revenue they have, and they want to increase that revenue. You have to look at it exactly from the other side. You have to look at what you've accomplished. Don't forget you've accomplished something in your current agreement. You want to take that as your baseline. And then you want to start working out your readiness and strategy from there, exactly the same way Microsoft is. One of the biggest challenges is that most organizations that work with Microsoft are not in the same sales position as Microsoft. So they don't think as sales as a sales account manager does. But many times you have to, if you want to work and you want to compete on the same playing field. So readiness and strategy really important. A lot of priorities, what you have, where you want to get, and then once you understand where you're starting and where you want to finish, then you can start putting in your actual requirements. So your requirements are part what your current state is, and part of it is what is your roadmap, not what is Microsoft's roadmap. That works into your roadmap. So you have to have your internal discussions with your team. Okay, you've seen everything Microsoft has to offer. Fantastic, looks great. What do we need? And not only what do we need, when will we need it? Will we need it in 6, 12, 18, 24 months? And that works into your requirement document. So you are now in a stage where you understand where you started, where you want to go. Now you want to ask Microsoft, you want to provide Microsoft with your asks, with your needs. And that comes down to a nicely formulated document that I like calling a requirement document. There are other ways to position it, but basically it's what you need and when you need it and what are you expecting it to cost. You might want to give a general number. You might not want to give a general number. We can get into the negotiation tactics down the line. Another part of that important stage is making sure that you draft something for your stakeholders. So part of that document preparation stage is formulating a quick memo to your stakeholders, informing them that one, negotiations are about to start or they have started. These are our key milestones of the process. This is what we want to achieve. And also, it's important to let them know that if they are contacted by Microsoft, please inform us, bring us into the picture. They need to be part of the team. Because if you don't brief the stakeholders and they start getting calls in from Microsoft, you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know what information they're going to share with them. You want to control the overall tone and process. That's, I think, is the essence of what I'm trying to present as a methodology. Control, control, control. Prepare, prepare, prepare at all levels of the organization. Stakeholders from finance to legal to IT, and of course, head of procurement.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to highlight on this slide is that we put T-18 here. So if you remember, the name of this presentation is the T-18 plan. Therefore, what it means is that we suggest that you create these documents in the very beginning. Maybe not T-18, maybe T-17. I mean, Daryl, you know, we discussed experiences from your history dealing with this, from my history dealing with this, and we've seen customers who started preparing their requirements like a month prior to the renewal. You can still achieve certain things if you do that, but it becomes a nightmare. People losing their sleep, people having to work 20 hours a day. So don't delay. Just don't.
I agree.
So yeah, now we get into the almost technical side, which is not yet, but this is where we. I think you have sort of a gap. You may start, depending on how well prepared you are. If you have resources, you may start T-18. This is what we suggest as well. Do the technical and asset analysis. You know what you're using, alternative products, but yes, you may delay it. But don't delay it until the last day, where you will need to think what you need to think about when you think about when to start the preparation. And I mean, looking at your inventories, looking at your tools, gathering all the Office 365, Microsoft 365 usage data, looking at how it's used, looking at your strategy, where you're going to, and I'll let you talk about it as well. But the bigger you are, the more various parts of infrastructure you have. And especially if you have outsourcers. If, say, you're a large organization like 50,000 seats and you have 5 outsourcers, I would suggest start at the very beginning. T-minus and T, at least notify them that you're going to engage in this exercise, because you're gonna have tremendous pushback from outsourcers. They don't like you. Even if those are your assets, they don't like you, peeping into their estates. But you need to know. You need to know what's what I'm looking for. What are the foundational bits of information they use to calculate the licensing requirements? Because they tell you need so many licenses. How do they know? Verify that. I'm not saying they're bad people, but that's not their first priority. Looking after your licensing estate, even if it's contracted. So if you have outsourcers, if you have complex infrastructures, start as early as possible. If your infrastructure is simple, yes, you can probably delay to like 8-9 months before the renewal. But that's my point of view here from very painful experience.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely in agreement. One of the benefits of starting early is cleaning up your estate. So if you've got a messy estate, meaning over deployed or under licensed, depending how you want to phrase it, you want to have enough time to go around and clean that estate. You don't want to be in a situation where, let me give you a very good example. I'll give you an example of something that I saw not long ago. Not Microsoft, but another vendor, that the organization was audited. And this is, you can take the same protocol for an audit as well. And the company didn't have really good tools in place to conduct an audit. And they were running PowerShells, they were just running all kinds of various homemade tools to check this very specific vendor. I'm going to say it out loud, Adobe. So I'm going to make it easy. And they thought that they were compliant. And when they asked to get in, to engage with a third party to verify, and a very specific tool was run to analyze Adobe licensing, they were like shocked that triple quantities of Adobe appeared out of nowhere in their organization. So that they were totally blown away that their homemade asset management protocols and tools and scripts actually only discovered around a third of what they actually had installed. And the shock, of course, the shock equals money, and money equals budgets, and budget equals somebody's head. So the point I'm trying to drive here is that even if you think that you are compliant, it's always recommended to refresh your view and gather the information and take that time so you're not surprised. And that Microsoft doesn't have more information than you have. That's the worst thing that can happen.
I would go very bold and say, if you don't know your estate really well, I can almost guarantee that Microsoft know much more than you do. They might not necessarily know how to use that information, but they know quite a lot, and there are lots of ways for Microsoft to know what's going on. So please, you need to prepare, you need to analyze, and then my simple explanation here is: do you want to get to a negotiation table with, say, sort of like perceived compliant position, and let me just remember something from my memory, like say $15 million per year potential bill of material, or you want to assess your assets, you want to look at you want to invite SMEs, involve them in analysis and optimization. We'll get to optimization in a few slides from here. So we're going to give you a few ideas about what you can optimize and where to look, where are the quick wins. I'd rather go to negotiation table with knowing absolutely that right now I'm compliant. I have that much fat I'm going to decommission. So I need a plan of battle. Where my troops are. So what's actually going on? Are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they actually my troops, or somebody just told me that we have 1,000 I don't know archers in that corner, but we don't. Yeah, so
that's a good
so, that,
I like that. Yeah, exactly.
so yeah, and then good point here about the gap analysis, which I'll let Daryl. I'll let you talk about the gap analysis as well.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say a few words. So the gap analysis is basically, it's a very straightforward, but it needs knowledge. You're looking at what's installed compared to what your entitlements are. It might look straightforward, but where it gets really complex, and it's getting more and more complex, is what actually are your entitlements? What do you own? Even if you do have a good report from Microsoft, taken straight from their I've gone blank. What's the name of the report, Alex?
Effective license position, you mean, or Microsoft license statement? That one.
The Microsoft licensing statement. Yeah, I was looking for the formal name. So
That
even
one,
if you have an MLS, a Microsoft licensing statement, and that's really the golden grail of your entitlements, so to say. Even that's complex, and even that is open to interpretation. So
and
that takes time.
It's not perfect. What it's going to miss if you had any acquisitions or mergers or divestitures or any transitions, they're not going to be on the MLS. So MLS will and many companies, they have had at least one of those events in their history. So MLS is a good starting point, but you need to know what was happening that is not reflected there. So,
and that can take months. Let's be that just that understanding of your licensing position, of your of what you own, collecting that data, especially if you're a very dynamic organization, you've gone through divestitures, mergers, acquisitions, whatever. Just getting that data and then normalizing it takes months of work. So again, this is all about understanding what you need, what are the building blocks, and starting as soon as possible to start arranging that. So even if you start doing your analysis 10 months prior to the renewal or 8 months prior to the renewal, you need to start a few months before that, just understanding how you're going to get that report, where that report is going to come from. Do you have the knowledge and the expertise within your organization to analyze that report? Do you need third-party assistance? Is it going to be your reseller that's going to be assisting you? Are you going to take a third-party vendor to assist? Again, those are pieces of the puzzle you don't want to wait to the last minute to put into place. So let's move forward, Alex.
Yeah. So, well, this is the
financial analysis. This is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite parts of every negotiation preparedness stage. And I always start off, people ask me, people think that I'm crazy. I always start off with, I ask the customer, what's your budget? Okay. What's your budget?
It's a valid question. Why would they be reacting to it, in a strange manner? It's a very valid question. You can have constraints.
Because people don't start with their budget. For some reason, they know what their budget is, or they might think they know what the budget is, but they like postpone the bad news to the last minute. Most times, the Microsoft renewal costs don't match up to your budget. The budget is, I won't say always, then you have to be really, really on top of things to get the budget right. But I would say, I'd risk and say 80% of the time, budgets aren't aligned with your actual renewal costs. Not everything's taken into consideration. You've missed on your cloud growth. You're consuming more on the cloud than you expected. I would say that's obvious, but internally, that's a big surprise. You have deployed more E5 licenses than you expected. You have somebody in the organization is rolling out a BI initiative that you're not even aware of and wasn't budgeted. Where is that budget going to come from? Yes. You want to give your factory workers, 10,000 factory workers, access to email, but that hasn't been budgeted for the EA renewal. It's another budget. So you might have to start maneuvering and bringing in budget from here and there. So you need to start with your budget. That's your main bucket. So part of the financial analysis, you have to have, this is my budget. This is where the money is going to come from. These are the stakeholders that actually have responsibility for this budget. Then next is your financial constraints. Is your organization looking to actually reduce the budget? Maybe you might have had a budget at the beginning of the year and it's not that good of a year. You've got COVID-19 or other restraints, and your CEO said everybody needs to cut down 10% on the budgets or 20% on the budget. So that's a constraint that you need to take into consideration. That's going to mess up your technology roadmap with Microsoft. You might need additional payments. You might need financing. You have to speak to your finance department, understand how they want to recognize the revenue. They might want to recognize it over a certain period of time. They might want to postpone the revenue recognition to the next fiscal year. Microsoft's fiscal year ends end of June. When does yours end? Do they match up? So you need to start putting those constraints again and planning for them and understanding them. And then third part of the puzzle is, what are the commercial alternatives? So it's obvious that you want to renew an enterprise agreement. Maybe it's obvious, but today you also have a CSP agreement that's optional. So you want to start looking at what are your alternatives commercially, one within Microsoft, EA versus CSP. Another option is, what are your alternatives financially for specific products from other vendors? You want to start reviewing maybe you've got a very big security move in a certain area. What are your alternatives? You need to start gathering benchmark information and financial information about the cost of your alternatives. And that all that needs to come into your financial analysis. That's going to be part of your overall negotiation strategy. That's going to be part of your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. I talk about that in my class. So a lot comes into play here. Financial analysis, key piece of the negotiation process.
Can I drop in a couple of numbers here, because I like numbers. So my experience is, if you're not prepared for an enterprise agreement renewal and you don't have budgetary expectations, so this is how it usually compares. So number one, Microsoft's target is to increase your spend with Microsoft in the end of the enterprise agreement by 15 to 20%. That's your first kind of budgetary expectation that must be set. So if your budget right now is $10 million per year, you should expect that Microsoft would be expecting at least $12 million per year. So if you budget at 11, that's not enough. But then that is your constraint. Which you then, kind of to which you, what's the word I'm looking for, then try and optimize your renewal so it stays in those constraints. It's important to understand them. The other thing is where many companies and organizations get really heavily surprised is when there's a migration from on-premises to the cloud, and not everybody yet has migrated from on-premises to the cloud. The numbers are not as good as Microsoft would like them to be. In those cases, I've seen budgets double. I'm not joking, double.
Yeah.
From, say, it's a good example that I have is like 9 to 17 million per year. It's one that I will always remember. That was a huge increase, and nobody was prepared for it. So they were thinking that it could be about 11 to 12 million. It was actually a jump from 9 million to 17 million per year. That's the sort of budgetary expectation that you need to set. You need to be absolutely open about it. Don't have blue sky thinking doesn't help here. So if you're not prepared, this is what your first bill of material is going to look like. At least 20% increase, up to 70-80% increase. It's a huge thing. So review your budget, review your constraints, and always look at alternatives. Always, just start talking about alternatives, even with your LSP, if you don't want to engage with an SME. Although I would still be very, very cautious, as Daryl suggested, with involving LSPs in helping you, asking bees to look after the honey.
Yeah. Tell me, Alex, housekeeping. How much time do we still have so I don't miss out on anything?
We actually scheduled this to be 90 minutes, but I think we're gonna wrap it up in about 10 minutes. So
Oh no, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I'm not overrunning the
I
plan time.
did last time I did a big mistake. I only scheduled it for 1 hour, and then we overran, and many people had to jump off on, to go on other meetings. So this time I tried to be clever. So
Okay, so I'll try not to take up all the time. So this is all about technical optimization. This is your side of
yeah, let me talk about this one. So first of all, why you need to start preparing and reviewing your infrastructure well ahead. And I see lots of resistance, not only from outsourcers, but also from C-level people, because they think everything is fine. We have all these people looking after our organization. There shouldn't be anything that is excessive, that is what I call, fat. There's always something. So that's my experience. I've never seen a single exercise when we couldn't find something that could be decommissioned tomorrow. It was about to be decommissioned, but wasn't. So that is your first optimization. Very simple. And when I say it's decommissioned, I'm not even talking about single virtual machines or single servers that have been running from, I don't know, to 1996 somewhere in the corner. Nobody knows what they're doing, but they're there. I'm talking about instances when we found that due to various migration projects, there are still huge clusters left running, and clusters consuming Windows Server data center licenses and SQL Server licenses. But that's not only that's not the only saving. Because in addition to that, so I told about this example a couple of times in my videos. There was a customer to whom we pointed at the potential to save £1 million £1 million British pounds per year on licenses. They themselves calculated that by decommissioning that outdated hardware, they could save 1.5 million, so 1.5 times more, in addition, on top of the licensing costs, on decommissioning that hardware, because they were paying for support, electricity, and other various things. So obviously, it's an obvious thing. There's always something to decommission. Why now you don't want to carry it over to the renewal? Why would you pay for more licenses? And we won't tell Microsoft. What if they audit you? So you don't want to pay for those extra licenses for the next 3 years, or 1 year if you buy them through subscriptions. Why would you? Just optimize now. Cut the fat now. Consolidate and segregate. Consolidation, segregation. So a bit more details on the next slide. And one of the most important things right now, because the majority of the budget is Microsoft 365, and let me actually switch to that slide because I'm talking about reharvesting and optimization, is Office 365, Microsoft 365, if left unattended or just managed with a light touch, the average industry-wide number right now, the average saving that companies achieve on just removing the so-called zombies from Office 365, the accounts they holding on to licenses, that they've left the company, many years ago, no, not years, maybe months ago, but they're still holding on the license. The license is not unassigned from a user when they leave the organization. So this is the number. I like dropping in the numbers. 18%. That is the average across the software asset management industry right now. The average outcome of direct cost savings or cost avoidance if it's a subscription, by just looking at how licenses are assigned in Office 365. In addition to that, also, it's not only zombies. Zombies may be accounting for like 7 to 9%. There are also things like depackaging, which we talked about in the previous live. By the way, please watch it, because there's a live called Microsoft 365 cost optimization, cost avoidance. Please watch this live, because there we're giving you exactly what you need to look at, where you need to, or how to optimize your personas, because that's another thing. Persona assessment and reshuffling the licenses, and especially when you approach the renewal. Even midterm it's important, but when you approach the renewal, you need to make sure you're paying for what you're using. You're not paying for something you're not using, and avoid mistakes like shared mailboxes, which is going to be a topic for the Monday Live next week, by the way. SQL Server consolidation is a huge thing. So because the majority of the budget is right now in Microsoft 365, the data center licenses get sort of like the second class treatment. Oh, we're only paying for them, 10-20% of the budget, so we shouldn't really. Let's assess it from the 80-20 rule. The thing is, you can still save a lot in the data center, even though it's not the biggest part of the budget. So percentage wise, same as in the data center right now, especially if you're migrating. I'm not really happy to drop that number in because it's not believable, but 40 to 50% can be achieved sometimes. So just on that part of the budget. So SQL Server consolidation is still a huge thing. SQL Server is still not the thing that has been widely migrated into Azure or other cloud platforms. Many databases still run on site for various reasons, security, performance, etc. So there's still a lot of potential there. Obviously, getting rid of unused hardware, as I just mentioned, and cloud. Don't forget the cloud, because part of every Microsoft negotiation right now will be Azure commitment. If you're on Azure, or if you're going to Azure, how much are you going to commit? You want to commit what you want to use, and be very skeptical here. Take any optimistic figure thing. Cut it in half, at least. Maybe I suggest, cutting 1/3. Actually, I usually suggest not to commit at all, but it's difficult because sometimes that Azure commitment can be used as a leverage to get other discounts. So think wisely, but don't overcommit. Development segregation. So why? Not compliance reasons. Just segregate development. That's it. So I have a separate video about development licensing and why it's a good idea to segregate. It's fine to mix it, by the way. It's fine, but it's a gray area. So all this, kind of putting your house in order before the renewal. Ideally, finishing that exercise about 3 to 6 months. So T-3, T-6 before the renewal. So then you get the bill of material that reflects your current picture. Plus, I said current, your deployment and development plans for the next 3 years. So you have a strategic picture, not just what's going on right now, but also what's going to happen. And yeah, obviously, metering and reharvesting. I want to spend too much time on this, but one of the small things, but sometimes could be pretty large in money. It could be just achieved by removing software that's not used. And I'm talking about desktop software, so Project and Visio. If you're migrating, especially if you're migrating from Project Online, Visio Online to the cloud, you don't need to subscribe to all the cloud licenses. You'll buy them as and when. So bear that in mind. And you probably, if you haven't looked at this before, if you don't have a tool that reports usage, if you don't reharvest right now, you can probably reharvest up to 80% of Project and Visio installs. That is, again, my experience. So, final word to Daryl.
So thank you, Alex. So negotiate. Don't forget that the negotiation starts the minute that you engage with Microsoft. So it's not the official meeting. Many people get confused and think that, well, when we set up the first meeting in our diaries, we look at the date and we say, okay, this is the date, this is when we're going to meet, we're going to start our first discussions. That's when negotiations actually have started, or actually will start. That's a misunderstanding of the negotiation process and what's actually going on in the organization. The negotiation process starts from the minute Microsoft engages with you. I would say maybe not 30 months prior or 36 months prior. I don't want to exaggerate too much, but I would say 18 months prior to the renewal, when Microsoft starts to engage your stakeholders and starts to do roadshows internally and starts to help you migrate and shift workloads to the cloud or move to 365 E5 and other security components, and having a pilot on this and having a pilot on that. That's when the negotiation actually has started. I call that the unofficial, under the cover negotiation. So please be aware of that. If you understand that, your whole thought process of how negotiations are conducted will change completely. You'll start seeing things happening that you've never seen before. You'll realize what's going on, what subtle movements Microsoft is playing within your organization and putting all the building blocks required for a good renewal on their part into place. That is really, really good negotiation. That's a good negotiation practice. I want you to start thinking like that. I want you to start preparing ahead of time, slowly getting everybody engaged, having a good T-18 plan, understanding your financials, doing your optimization, and ultimately leading the process. I want you to leave with one important message from today's session, and that is you need to be a leader. You need to be the leader of Microsoft within your organization, even if you're not a decision maker. If you are, fantastic. But if you're not, you can still be a leader. People will appreciate that. And ultimately, the results will be far more better than if you just are in the driver's seat, sitting next to Microsoft and letting them drive to the renewal on their with their own pace. So thank you,
Yeah.
Alex.
Thank you, Daryl. So on the last slide, I just wanted to show we had a few yes and yes pleases when we asked about the desire to watch a live about unified support, which is honestly one of the if there's a thing, if there's one single thing that if you ask me what do you dislike about Microsoft, that will be unified support. I keep it very close to my heart. I wear my heart up my sleeve, as they say, because it's just a ridiculous thing that they did, and you need to take control. You need to take control of that, and there are various ways to, and there are alternatives as well. Yeah. So, hi, can we have a session on Microsoft licensing from basic for beginners? Right. Thank you for that question. Because although we're not going to be like doing like licensing training, there are other licensing trainings that are available from cheap to expensive. But we're going to cover Microsoft basics, licensing basics for absolute beginners, especially those who are not technical. So I'll try to. I can't promise it's going to be 100% success because I'm a techie. I come from an IT background, so a processor is not just sound for me. I know what a processor is. I know what it looks like, and I put them myself into computers, so I know what that is. But that's going to be the 4th of August, the beginning of our training sessions. So it's a brilliant question. So let me scroll back to that slide. So please subscribe to this channel, and please come on the 4th of August for this training. And there's going to be other 7 sessions. So each session with a 2-week gap. So we're going to end about 10th of November. And then we'll give you a registration form for a test. So you don't need to register for the training, although we'll prefer you to. We're going to give you an option to pass a test, which is going to be free. And what we're going to give you if you pass the test, it's going to be tough. I can't promise it's going to be simple. We're going to give you a digital badge, which you'll then, showcase on your LinkedIn profile, whatever other social networks you are on. So yes, you absolutely can have a session on Microsoft licensing basics. 4th of August. Please come back. Any more questions, please? Yeah, we have this great reaction. Thank you. Love it. Right. So just a quick reminder. I mean, it would be a shame not to do this. Let me scroll like this. If you need any help with your situation, so firstly, reach out to us, ask a question. Maybe we can just help you with a simple advice. No problem with that at all. But if you're facing a complex negotiation upcoming, or any serious like Microsoft license optimization questions, we provide these services on a paid basis, of course. So yeah, please reach out to us and let's see where you are, where you want to be, and how we can take you from point A to point B. We've done it so many times. So on this fabulous note, I'd like to thank you everybody for coming here today, watching and surviving this session with me and Daryl Ullman from Ullman Consulting. And thanks again, and safe with knowledge of licensing. Daryl, microphone goes to you.
So thank you everybody for bearing with us. Most of you have stayed the duration of the live. I know that it's a precious time that you take off, so I also appreciate you staying on and listening to us. Hope it's been valuable, and looking forward to meeting you again in one of the upcoming sessions. Thank you.
Yeah, so please come next Monday, 6:30 a.m. or watch recorded. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have another session. You can get notified by subscribing to this channel or by following the Some Expert page on LinkedIn. So yeah, please do that, one of those, and we'll let you know what the next session will be. Right now, the idea is to have a session which will be talking about vendor negotiations psychology, isn't it, Daryl? So
in general, yeah.
A generic vendor negotiation presentation, which is part of the Daryl's own training course for free. So yeah, please come and join. And again, thank you very much, and goodbye. Have a productive rest of the week.